Al Emery here with Momentum and taking you through the April webinar, particularly focusing on features of Exo that you can use in tough times, managing cost control and control of any outgoing expenses, as well as looking at audit trail. And then in the second part of the webinar, we're going to be introducing a company that we partner with quite often called Utilising, and they're in the accounts payable automation business. So I won't steal Steve's thunder. We'll introduce him at 11:30. So I'll move straight into demonstration mode and cover off these key aspects of Exo that you should find useful in managing your costs. Okay, so I'm logged into MYOB Exo Business here, and the first thing we're going to be looking at is managing budgets and forecasts. So obviously, budgets are a good way of managing what your expected income and expenses are, and then reporting against that, and particularly drilling into exceptions to those. So how do you manage budgets in Exo? You go to the Utilities tab, General Ledger Utilities, Set up and Maintain GL Budgets. And that will bring up the budget screen. Now there's already budgets in my system going back to previous years, and I already have a budget loaded for my 2020 budget. And this screen, for example, if I simply look at the sales account, shows that you can budget at 3 levels in Exo. You can budget at the branch level, the account level, and the sub-account level for each period of the financial year. Okay, so for the sales account, sub-account 1 for period 1, which would be July, I can manually update that budget value to $6,000 and save that. And when you're then looking at that budget or reporting against that budget, you'll see that value. Now, most people aren't going to budget using this screen. This is usually what I use to inquire on things. When it comes to creating a new budget, you go to the Actions tab and you can click on New Budget. Or you can edit an existing budget. But more importantly, what most people do is use Excel to set their values. So you can export and import budget, and I'll show you that momentarily. So in this worked example, what I'm going to do is create a forecast. So I've already got a budget for 2020. I'm now going to create a forecast. I'm calling it Forecast 1. When you create a budget, you have 3 options. You can create an empty budget, so it'll be blank, or you can copy an existing budget. So I could take my existing 2020 budget and copy that as my forecast. Or I can copy last year's actuals. So in the example where you wanted to say, well, I'm budgeting to be 20% up across the board this year, then I could say my forecast or my budget is going to be last year's actuals multiplied by 1.2, rounded to the nearest $100. And that will create that new forecast based on last year's actuals. So that's a good way of doing it. It gives you a good starting point. In this case, I'm going to copy my existing budget, and because of COVID-19, I'm actually expecting to be 20% down. So I'm going to multiply it by 0.8, round it to the nearest $100, hit go. Doesn't take very long usually, depends on how many combinations of branches and accounts and sub-accounts you might have in your system. So I've now got my forecast, and if I go back to my sales account, you can see that these budget values on the right have reduced. Now what I'm going to do is drop that to Excel, update some things, and then bring it back in. So you can go Export Budget, pick the budget or forecast you're working on. You then have the ability to say, do I want one branch or all branches, one account or all accounts, sub-accounts or not, totals or not, and zeros or not. So I want everything. It will, by default, prompt you to save it in the predefined temp folder for Exo, but you can save it anywhere you like. And it's going to save it as a CSV file. Okay, so now I have my spreadsheet. I'm going to freeze the pane so I can scroll up and down. I'm going to put a total on the end so I can check totals as I go. And then I'm just going to update some values. So it's really May, June that are going to be down, say, for example. So I might say 10,000, 8,000. So just doing some quick examples there, and then save that into the same folder as a CSV. So I'll just make a note of some of those values I've changed. Close that file. You now have the ability to import your budget. Now in the import screen, if you're importing to update an existing budget, then you enter in here the exact budget name of the budget you want to update. You can use this to create a new budget. So in this case, you would give it a new name, but I want to update my existing 2020 FC1. I'm going to overwrite the records. So I select my file that I've just created, which is that one. Exo immediately reads that file, and you can see, I haven't even imported it yet, but I can see that the values that I changed are reading into the spreadsheet where I've updated them. So hit OK, and that will just quickly go through and update that budget. Okay, so pretty straightforward. If I look now at this budget screen, I can see that those values that I've updated have reduced in the accounts and sub-accounts and months that I updated. Then you move on to reporting. So your reports against budget are in the same place as they're part of your P&L and or balance sheet reports. Now this obviously depends what's been configured for you in the past. If you weren't using budgets in the past, then Momentum may not have configured a budget comparison report. But I'll show you a working example, and then I'll show you a quick example of how you can add budget information into an existing report. So depending on how things have been set up for you, you may have more than one report which includes a budget analysis. So let's just look at this one, April. Now, you can compare your report to whichever budget you choose. So I could compare against my 2020 budget or my 2020 forecast. So I'm going to do my forecast. Okay, so this report, in fact, is configured to have the actuals for the month with the budget for the month and a variance, and then the year-to-date actuals against the year-to-date budget with a variance. The variance can be expressed in dollars or percent, and those are all simple things to do in the report design. Okay. Obviously, your standard features are available to you to export reports to Excel. If you don't currently have reports that compare to budget or not quite in the way that you'd like, I'll just show you a couple of simple things of how that works. So in the Reports tab, GL Report Designer, that's where all the profit and loss and balance sheet and budget comparison reports are configured. And they're all made up of three key screens. So one is the summary, which is what's the title of the report, is it portrait or landscape, what criteria do you have, for example, do you give the option to list sub-accounts or not? So these are the defaults. Usually you are going to show sub-accounts, suppress zero values and use the clarity report. The key things are the rows and columns. So adding budget information usually just requires changes to the columns, not the rows. So the rows set out the structure of the report down the left-hand side of the page. So sales, cost of sales, GP, overheads, total overheads, profit. So you shouldn't have to change that. Now there's two ways of editing a report. A safe way is to copy it first and create a new one, and that way if you break it, you haven't broken the original. So that's a safe way to start. So let's do that. So you can see that's created a new report called Copy Of, and this is my budget test report, and I can change the name of it later. And then the rows and columns, so I'm not changing the rows, I'm happy with those, but the budget information I might want to change. So the column headings, the period is basically designed to show you the current value for the month you've selected when you've run the report. So if that's in there, you don't need to change it. What I had done in this one is say I also want to show the budget for that month, okay? So in this screen, you've got the option when you use your right click on your mouse to create a new column or edit a column or delete a column. And then you can use the arrows to move them up or down. So to edit this one, the key thing you're looking at is the type. So the type is basically telling the report, what am I going to put in this column? The heading is just whatever you put in there, okay? So you can see that I've got the period, which is what I had in the previous column. And then I've got all kinds of options around, do I want to show actuals for this year, actuals for last year, year to date, actuals for the full year last year, and then I've got various budget options. So budget, which means month budget, year to date budget, which is the, the accumulated budget for the year to date up to the point I'm running the report, or the full year budget. So I had already selected budget, so I'm going to leave that there. Then I've got actuals year to date. So that's just the selection of this year. And then I've got my year to date budget. So that's just column heading, whatever I decide to call it, type year to date budget. Now, you don't see any columns there for the variance. And the reason is that Exo puts the variance column in automatically. So anywhere in a report you put a budget, when the report is run, the very next column will be the variance column. If I go back and edit this, you can see on the front screen, I can choose to show the variance as a %. If I don't choose that, then it'll show the variance as dollars. Okay? Now I click on this little icon here, which is to generate the table in the database. So I do that, and then I save and exit. And now in my month-end reports, my new report is in the list. I'm running it for April, for my forecast. I'm going to choose not to use the clarity formatting template just while I'm testing it. And you'll see I've now got variances as percentages instead of dollars. So I've got my April for the month, my month budget, the variance, my year-to-date budget, and the variance with variance as percentages. So that's a quick little training session on how to make simple changes to a GL report. And again, just the safest way to do it is copy the report first. That way, if you break it, you can delete it, and then you can go back to your original and have another go. Obviously, if you run into trouble, just give our support desk a call and we can help you get things sorted. So just back to our agenda, reporting. So we've just covered budgets and forecasts quickly and reporting against budget. I'm going to move on to approvals. And in doing that, I guess just before I do that, the other way you can see a budget figure is in the trial balance tree or in a general ledger account. So I can look at, what's my trial balance P&L for April. I want to look at my IT costs, drill into that account. So every account in the general ledger has this summary screen which shows you the values for each month for the current year to date. You can drill into the transactions for any month, sub-account, branch, and there's a budget tab here which you may not have even noticed. So this basically shows you what the budget values are as configured in the budget, and you can actually edit them from here. Save that, close that, refresh that, and that budget would be updated. Okay, so the next area is approvals, and Exo has, I guess, what I describe as basic approvals, and they work in two key areas. One is purchase orders, and one is creditor invoices requiring to be authorized before they can be paid. There's some additional things we can kind of make happen through a feature called Exo Alerts, so I'll touch on that as well. So firstly is approvals may not be activated, and in the configuration module, which is accessed through Utilities, Configuration, and your Exo Business Configurator, or there is a separate icon that you can log into for it. Under the Profile section, if we search for Authorization, you can enable authorization on creditor payments, and you can enable authorization on purchase orders. If you're enabling authorization on purchase orders, then you also need to enable extended purchase order statuses. And that just gives the full workflow that's available. And then you move on to who can authorise what and for how much. So in the staff area of Exo, each person has an authority tab. And that sets what is the dollar value of a transaction that they can authorise for a creditor invoice, a stock-related purchase order, a non-stock-related purchase order. So in this case, Bridget has a $2,000 limit for all three of those things. And Greg has a $100,000 limit. Okay, so how that works in practicality. In my Exo screen here, I'm logged in as Bridget. And Bridget can create purchase orders. Now she's just created this one and the value of it is $67,000 and it's set automatically to awaiting authorization. So whenever a purchase order is created, or in this case, so I might edit it and change that quantity to 60, which will increase the value of the purchase order. As soon as the purchase order exceeds the limit for that person entering it, it will automatically go to a status of awaiting authorization, and the user will get a warning that they've saved that purchase order for a value that's above their limit. Now, based on that, we can then cause an email to automatically be sent to the approver using the Exo Alerts feature. And if Bridget tries to authorise that herself, she will get a message to say you don't have sufficient authorisation limit to authorise that. She can't authorise it. In my original screen, I'm logged in as Greg. And Greg can authorise it. So he'll get the message, do you want to authorise it, yes or no? Yes. The status is now not processed. I should say that prior to it being authorised, it cannot be printed or emailed to the supplier. Once it's been authorised, it now has a status of not processed and it can be printed and emailed. So if we go back to Bridget's screen, this one's Bridget's screen. She could now print and send that purchase order, depending on her access rights. She could do a receipt against that and process that through to invoice step. So that's the basics of how the purchase order authorization works. With the payment or creditor invoice authorization, the way that works is creditor invoices are entered. They would not be able to be paid via the creditor payment processor unless they are authorised for payment. Now, there's a couple of ways that that can be done. With that feature turned on the Transactions tab, this may not have been obvious to you before, there is actually an authorised column, a date, and a column which shows the staff number of the person who's authorised it. Okay? So anybody right-clicking on that invoice, if they have rights to authorise it, would be able to authorise it. So I've done effectively the opposite, so I've set it to unauthorised. So it's a simple right-click, authorize or not, and that records the date that occurred and who has authorised it. So the benefit of that is it gives you the protection that when you're doing creditor payment runs, only those invoices that have been checked or authorised by an appropriate person can actually be paid. Okay, so in my creditor payment processor, I would not be able to set transactions as able to be released or paid if they had not been authorised. So any of these suppliers, I'll be able to tell, is that authorised or is it not? If I'm an authoriser, I can authorise it from within the creditor payment processor. So one way of having the authoriser do the step that they need to do is effectively, create a payment run. So you might say, release all, save, and then have the authoriser come in and check it, and in checking it, they can drill into each transaction and authorise it. So you'll notice that the only ones that I can set to pay are the ones that have been authorised. If they haven't been authorised, the system just won't flag them as ready to pay. Okay, so I'm just conscious of time. We got off to a slow start with my audio. I'm going to touch on the audit quickly before I hand over to Steve. So with audit, I would have to say that Exo has only basic audit functionality, and that's by way of a concept called reason classes. So reason classes can be turned on or off, and they, for example, allow you to say, if somebody's processing a customer credit note, do I want to turn that reason class on? And then if I do that, I actually create a list of valid reasons that somebody might then choose. So customer credit note, incorrect price is reason A. And faulty goods is reason B. So turning that on would cause the user doing the credit note to be prompted to say, pick the reason for this credit note occurring. And that gets written to an audit table. As I mentioned, there's only a predefined list. There are things, important ones, for example, like the bank details of a supplier have been changed. And these reasons, when they're activated, can be set to active, which prompts the user, or silent, which still writes to the audit, but doesn't necessarily inform the user. A better audit trail is via an add-on that Momentum's written, called the Momentum Auditor. And it's really designed to track any or all changes to just about any record in the system, other than very high volume transactional data like stock transactions. So it can be used so that you can track all changes to things like customers, suppliers, stock items, prices, what have you. And it will track who changed it, when they changed it, what it was before they changed it, and what it is now. Yes, the add-on can be used in job costing. So if you wanted to track, say, for example, changes to the header details of a job, you would be able to track that. Job transactional detail is probably very high volume tables that we wouldn't order, but who created a job, who changed details on the header of the job, definitely comes up. Now, I am getting an error in launching that add-on. So rather than spend time going through it, on our website, we have all of our add-ons listed, and we actually have a video about the Momentum Auditor. So it looks like that's not been added, but we do have a video on YouTube that I can include as a link for you. So apologies for that. All right, now before I hand over to Steve, I'm just going to pause there, and if anybody has any questions about those items I've just covered, please fire away. All right, Steve, so I'm just, I've taken you off mute and I've set you as the presenter. So while Steve's just getting himself sorted there, what accounts payable automation is all about is taking all of the labour and data entry out of accounts payable invoice entry and automating that, but it's a lot more than that as well. It adds the ability to have very sophisticated workflows around it. We have a number of our larger customers using it, and they have all given us, really positive feedback about DataLine, not just about their solution, but how well they implement it and how trouble-free the implementation is. So I will just hand over to Steve now. He's sharing his screen. You should be able to see it. So over to you, Steve.
Can you hear me okay, Al?
Certainly can.
Okay, very good. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for sparing some time to sit through our session this morning. I thought I'd just take this opportunity to explain what we offer for Exo customers looking to automate the processing of inbound supplier and creditor invoices, and tell you a little bit about us. And I understand that my boss tells me I can talk underwater, even under 3 feet of concrete, so I'll try and keep this to 15, 20 minutes if I can. So my name's Steve Morrill. I'm the Business Development Manager for the DataLine Group. We're based in Crow's Nest in Sydney, and we provide solutions in the accounts payable space. A little bit about us. We've been in business for 30 years. Our main product is our cloud-based accounts payable automation service, and we roll that out now for MYOB Exo advanced and account right clients. We have a number of other solutions that are part of our business as well, but we won't touch on those today. So, as I said, APA integrates with the 3 platforms in MYOB, and probably one of our biggest platforms is our Exo integration, which is very tightly integrated into the product. And I suppose what we talk about is what can we do for customers on the accounts payable invoice processing, and where's the value in it for you? Certainly there's some hard dollars to be saved. Certainly we can give you back more of your time and get you away from data entry and manual approvals. We can help you meet your compliance requirements depending on the nature of your business. And we can help you improve and instill a strong procurement process. And as Al mentioned, there are a lot of features within Exo to help you tie down the purchase order issuance. We look to help tie down the invoice matching and approval process at the back end to give you a very strong solution. We also help in some way to prevent fraud prevention by being able to validate supplier information off invoices coming in and trap any duplicates or invalid transactions. And of course, we help the environment. We're getting rid of the paper from the very beginning of the process. So to give you a quick smattering of the customers that are using our APA solution in the MYOB space, and we're in quite a number of various vertical markets across Australia and New Zealand, and there's quite a number of clients there. You might recognise some of those in your areas. And we're very strong in the MYOB Exo space in the construction and engineering, and also in the healthcare and support services, amongst others. And we've probably come across every implementation of Exo that we could have possibly imagined as part of that process. Pricing-wise, to give you a bit of background about our solutions and where they sit, so you'll have an understanding of that, and you'll be able to refer to this presentation later on that. We implement our solutions from $3,000 to $5,000, depending on what's required. That's a once-off cost that covers all implementation costs, training, setting up users, setting up workflows, rolling it out to a test environment, and then moving it into production, working with your business partner to get our software connected to your database, and making it all work smoothly from end to end. And where needed, potentially sometimes some small customizations are required to meet individual needs if needed. Transaction pricing starts at around about $1 for very small volumes and drops down as low as 60 cents depending on the volumes that you're processing a month. And that's what we charge. We charge a monthly fee on the service we provide, and you only pay for what we process. And some of our clients have had a payback in as little as 3 months from implementation, and that would come down to volumes. To give you an idea, a quick snapshot here of a client that was processing 500 invoices coming into their business a month. They were estimating it was taking between 9 and 10 minutes, depending whether it was a purchase order or a non-purchase order related invoice. And our solution allowed them to do it in less than 2 minutes per transaction, bearing in mind our average cost to process those transactions, plus allowing an additional cost for manual data entry or handling exceptions that couldn't be automatically matched. And they were saving somewhere around the $25,000 a year over their current process. So we could work through these numbers with every potential customer to work out where the savings can be. To give you a quick understanding of how the solution works, your MYOB Exo service sits on a server. Our solution sits in the cloud, and we connect through a small synchronization program that is loaded onto your Exo server. And that allows us to do a two-way communication every day. And that allows us to pull down information we need to match to the supplier invoice. We pull down supplier details, general ledger codes, job codes, and more importantly, for those that are issuing purchase orders, we pull down the purchase order and inward goods receipt information from MYOB Exo. Now, some of our clients don't do goods receipting until invoice comes in. We have a solution for that as well. But those that are going through a standard procurement process, we have a very neat solution that delivers some very good benefits. So just to diagrammatically explain that, obviously you're sending out your approved purchase orders to suppliers. Suppliers will send back goods or services, and you would typically receipt that stock or service into MYOB Exo through your Exo screens. Now, some of our clients don't do that receipting until the invoice comes in, and I'll explain how we manage that as well. But in a typical case, they are the first 2 steps. The third step, the invoice would come in, and typically it comes into your email server box. Sometimes they'll come in hard copy. Sometimes they'll come through other email addresses to different parts of your business. Essentially, we get our customers to put a business rule on their email server that copies anything coming in with an attachment to us, and it's forwarded to our bureau at Crow's Nest. And we provide an email address that's unique for your business, and those documents flow through to us automatically. Similarly, if you get a hard copy coming into your office or through another email address, you can on-forward to that address, or you can scan through a multi-function device and drop them into that same email address. Once they hit our bureau, this is where the back-end work starts on our part. We extract the attachment. We look to make sure it's an invoice. Our software will determine that, and we'll start to validate that transaction and extract information from it. And we extract header information from the invoice, and we will look for any corrections required. So we're a little bit different to other scanning solutions on the market that tend to use software to do what we call OCR reading, optical character recognition, extraction of data from documents, because we know that that's not 100% accurate. So we have people sitting in our bureau that will review any fields of information that haven't got the green light. So in the case where a data field is missing or unable to be read accurately, our staff will try and rectify that and correct the transaction. So our vision is to be able to pass through to our portal a document that has had as much data extracted from it as physically possible. And that transaction is then passed across into our portal. And if it's related to a purchase order that's been drawn from MYOB Exo, it's automatically matched and put into a queue ready for upload back to Exo. We call this our three-way auto matching process, where we match the purchase order details and the inward goods receipt to the invoice, and where they fully match, that transaction passes through with no hands-on whatsoever and will now be passed back into Exo for the next payment run and authorization. So we take any manual step out of that process. Of course, in a real world, that doesn't always happen. Some transactions will not match for one reason or another, and they are passed through, and we validate those and pass them through for some manual correction through our portal by your AP staff. And we can have a quick look at a demonstration and show you how that works and how information can be corrected. The very first thing we do each morning, once we've brought all of the documents into our online portal, is we prepare a report. Typically, in a business now, invoices that are coming in are sitting in trays in your email server, physically on desks throughout the business, waiting for approvals, sitting in approvers' email in trays, waiting to be acted on. And it's very hard to get a true picture of the total liabilities on any given day of documents that have not yet been put back into Exo. So we prepare a daily report that lists all these in a CSV file, and you get that every morning from our system, and it lists all those transactions, and I'll show you a sample of that. But once documents are passed into our portal, they're either automatically matched or they're passed through for AP staff to review any exceptions or unallocated items. And these are then amended, adjusted, and in the case of a purchase order related document, it may be a matter of changing an item price, adding a freight line, putting a rounding amount in to balance the transaction, or in the case of an item coming through without a purchase order, being able to allocate it to a ledger code and either manually or by the system, as the system learns how to code the documents, and then push it into a workflow. And a workflow will allow a purchase order related item to go through to another final approver if it's been changed, or in the case of non-purchase orders, allow them to be pushed out to multiple steps in workflows to go through an approval process that matches your current requirements. And once those are approved, all transactions are uploaded automatically by our system into the Exo database that night, and they'll flow through ready for your payment runs and your approvals within Exo, and you can choose when and how you pay those suppliers. And the whole process from end to end is to make this as streamlined and as quick as possible, so the documents sitting back in your system can be paid as early as possible to gain either supplier payment discounts or to at least meet the terms you have in place with them. And those payments can go off in a timely manner. So that's the end-to-end process of how we work. Your Exo system sits on your server. Our bureau sits in Crow's Nest and processes the documents. Our web cloud-based solution sits in the cloud and is accessed by your staff wherever they may be through a simple web browser. So if we look at the current manual steps that might go on in a typical business, and they can be many, and I've just listed down here 13 typical steps that most customers go through when they're processing invoices coming into the business. And most come in by email, so emails need to be opened, attachments need to be saved off, covering emails need to be created and documents sent out to other users, sorted and sent to approvers, and then some tracking process needs to be involved to be able to manage who has what and have they responded to it. Approvers need to receive the email and do something with the attachment, and in most cases, a lot of approvers print out those invoices again, might manually annotate them and rescan them with general ledger codes printed on them or a signature, and then sent back under an email back to accounts payable, who then receive that information and resave the attachment as a new file type because it's changed, and then ultimately enter the data into MYOB, and then file the electronic copy or the hard copy of the invoice, depending on the type of business, and then sometimes upload or attach them in MYOB as well manually, and also save any other associated documents that it might have been provided as part of that process. What we try to do is reduce these steps in every case down to a few basic, simple steps where an operator can go onto our portal, review the exceptions that haven't auto-matched, allow some data entry to occur, allow documents to flow into a workflow, approve the transactions through the interface, and from a central location, you monitor the daily outstandings in the workflow to make sure they're being looked after. It becomes a very simple process. So what happens to start the system? The first thing that happens is each person in a workflow will be told by our system they have documents waiting their attention. And it's simply they'll get one email each day and a log-on link to allow them to go into the system and handle the transaction. And the approvals, once they're in the system, can be done on any device. So no matter where they are, what they're doing, they can log on to our portal and carry out that task on any device. So it could be PCs, laptops, tablets, smartphones. The interface works through any browser and the operator can carry out those transactions no matter where they are. So each morning, as I said, we produce a daily liability report, and it's simply a spreadsheet of all the transactions that are held within our system. So it allows operators, finance department to quickly review who their suppliers are with outstandings, what status they're at in the process within our portal, who has them and who's looking after them, what their totals are, and they can be sorted by due dates or any other category on that report. So it's a very quick report that's generated each morning. And a lot of our customers use that each day just to look at their total cash position and where they might be. So let's jump on the system and have a quick look. I know we're limited on time. We'll just have a quick look. I can certainly follow up and do presentations one-on-one with anyone that's interested. Let's just quickly have a look and see how the system looks. So it's probably timed out. I'll just log back in. Okay, so let's log on as an approver. So the very first thing that happens is documents that can flow right through the system don't need to be touched by anyone, and then they can flow straight through to a final approver. And the approver could be one or many steps in a workflow. And they'll get a simple screen that allows them to see the transactions allocated to them. So looking at a transaction provides them the ability to authorize the transaction. They can view the image. And if they're happy with the image, the header information has been extracted by our OCR process in our bureau. The workflow that it's gone into, in this case, it's a one-step workflow to a branch manager. It's gone to them with any other comment that could be put in from the accounts payable area. In this case, the comment is, it's been conditionally approved. Can you please review? It's come from the CFO of Finance and it's gone out to a branch manager. In this case, the CFO has got it. Looking at the code line, how it's been coded. If I'm happy with that coding and I'm happy with the document, I can simply confirm, I can approve, reject, dispute, or forward it. And simply clicking on one of those will allow the transaction to go through and it's done. So I can close the window, close the image, and that transaction drops from my list. So an approver can carry out their tasks very quickly and easily and click through multiple documents in a record time. And their dashboard view just reduces and they can work on those at any time, 24/7 from any device. From a central location, the central AP operator will have a different view of the system, and they'll have a monitoring screen that allows them to track non-purchase order invoices coming in that need to go into a workflow, purchase order information that have been automatically matched by our system or not, and then a graphical display of all transactions that are out in workflows. So without going into too much detail, I can quickly show that the central AP person can view all the transactions out in workflows, who has them, how long they've had them, they're aged, and they can click through to any of those transactions and view those transactions on the screen as well. And click through and view the image or any comments. They can look to see if any comments have been made against the transaction in the history on the screen and whether they've been coded at this point. They can look at the coding as well. So it's a very transparent view from the central office, and they can manage those documents back at that dashboard as well. They can pull documents back, they can push them onto other users if they're not being acted on. So the two views that they see down here is the main ones. The ones that have come through our bureau and been unallocated would be sitting in this unallocated list, and they can simply choose any item and allocate it into a workflow. And workflows can be allocated manually or automatically by the system based on supplier. So I can physically just move this to a branch manager for approval, put a comment in if I want to, which is not compulsory. I can include the coding if I know the coding at this point. If the system has seen the invoice before, it could code it for me, and I can push that out for allocation. Oh, something's happened here. I have a bit of a problem with the internet at the moment. Let's try again. Okay, so if the system's seen the, if a document has been allocated to ledger code in the past, the system can default it by using a button called Previous Split, and it will pre-code it. If it hasn't seen it before, an operator may code it manually, and it can be coded to an expense or a stock line. And in stock lines, we support job codes, analysis codes, all the standard functionality in Exo. And once that's been put into a workflow, I can simply allocate it. It will push that out in the workflow and drop from my list. So from a central point of view, it's simply a matter of pushing documents out in workflows and coding them where needed, and managing any rejections that are coming back from operators, any exceptions from the system, such as documents that are duplicates or suppliers are not recognised. So invoice is a duplicate. In this case, you can search in the system for this invoice number to see where it's been processed before. If it's a valid supplier and not a valid supplier, you can check to see if the supplier has been set up in Exo, or more importantly, if it's even for your business. So in this case, the purchase order related ones here go through a different process. They go through a matching process where they're matched automatically. And these 13 here that have come through on the previous night have been automatically matched to inward goods receipts. So these line items here have been matched automatically by our system and don't need to be touched by anyone. So if they're fully matched, they go right through the system without anyone looking at them at all. Ones that don't match come through into what we call the unmatched invoices, where we can analyse them and understand why they haven't matched. And it could be for a number of reasons. There could be multiple receipts. There could be a freight line added to a document, such in this case, I have a freight line added to this invoice, which was not on my purchase order. So I need to generate a freight line to match that off. And I can simply do that by hitting a manual match screen button, and it will bring up a screen for me. And I can add the freight line in to balance it. And in this case, I'm still out 3 cents. So I can actually change an item price as well until it's matched fully, and then I can match it off. So I can manually match those transactions through. And then I can push that out to a final approver if I need to manage that process. So that's really the system end-to-end and a very quick overview. I think it probably used up my time well and truly. Certainly able to go through this at any time with anyone one-on-one and take them through in more detail and understand how it could work for their business. But essentially the end result is to be able to automate as much matching as possible of invoices, push other items out into workflows for streamlined approvals, and of course feed the transaction information back to Exo that night. If I just drop back to presentation.
Yep, thanks Steve. I'll just take control back.
Yeah. Oh, that was my detail. Yeah. Does that come back to you now?
Yes, it has, thanks. All right, so thanks everybody, and especially thanks to Steve for that example of what their solution can do. So hopefully you all got some value out of today's session, particularly around the expense and control measures you can take in your Exo, as well as, you know, the opportunities to make things more efficient and more accurate via the data line solution. We've got web links to the Exo Education Centre, MYOB's software pages, Momentum's YouTube channel, and Dataline's website. We have recorded this session, so we'll just check all of that and distribute that to everybody that attended, as well as there was a number of other registrations who just wanted the video that we'll do. So thanks everybody for today. We'll pause there. If there are any questions, feel free to fire away. Otherwise, thank you for attending.